Smurfs: The Lost Village. The Smurf movies by Sony Pictures Animation are not only their most popular franchise, but they are also the most hated. Along with Alvin and the Chipmunks, many people have used the Smurfs as a prime example of bad movies that were based on a cartoon. Maybe not the worst of the bunch, but still really unpleasant to sit through. Now, some of you might be wondering about my thoughts on the film, and if you need more info on that, then you can check out my crossover review with Joey Tedesco of Cartoon Palooza. But to give you the short answer, oh yeah, they're really bad, sometimes frustrating. As movies by Sony Animation, however, I would put them in the middle among their awful franchises. They're definitely better than Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, but even I'd take Hotel Transylvania over this. But now that the Smurfs are back rebooted and fully animated, will The Lost Village contain more wonder than you can imagine? Or is Peyo still rolling in his grave? Let's find out. The story. In a way, there is a bit of a story integrated here, but for a movie, that's not saying much. The film would go through 3 different plots. There's the main one where Smurfette is trying to figure out who she is in the world of Smurfs, there's the journey to find the Lost Village, and there's the discovery of said village where the main characters meet the new girl Smurfs. In a way, it doesn't know if it either wants to juggle these plots at once or just separate them as different acts. But either way, it does feel like it's just a regular episode of the Hanna-Barbera series, but added in a whole bunch of filler. A big issue with the writing is that it doesn't take the time to settle in the calmer moments to make the characters stronger, like go deeper into the development of Smurfette trying to figure out who she can be, or to understand the culture of the Lost Village and how it differentiates from the regular Smurf village we're familiar with. Instead, a lot of the film is covered with tropes and predictable plot points that you'd find in any other kids film, like montages with pop songs or chase scenes involving Gargamel.
Think fast! I caught it! This isn't good!
However, it does have a bigger driving force that explains the movie much more than any of the characters or the story itself, and that is the tone. That is more the reason why it feels more like your typical kids flick, as it sets itself as a comedy adventure. The problem with that, though, is that its execution is not as great. The adventure aspect doesn't feel that engaging or intense by mostly playing it safe, and the comedy leans more in the juvenile territory, like the jokes are more effective for children than for anyone over 9. Also, without going into any spoilers, I don't know if it's just me, or the ending completely rips off Pokémon the first movie. I'll just say that the resemblance is uncanny. Not necessarily great writing, but you can tell that the story is just holding up a sign that says it's for kids. The animation. I'll give Sony this, at least they made some animation that doesn't suck. If there's one thing that this movie improved the most upon its predecessors, it's easily on the visuals. For starters, the character designs are a lot more faithful to the original Peyo style. As it is fully animated now, there's no more need to make them look realistic and just focus on bringing the comic into a 3-dimensional world, on top of adding in some subtle textures to give the film a nice polish. As for the character animation, it does have a bit of a cartoony flair, but it's not overly exaggerated like some of Sony's previous works, leaving the characters just be who they are and not some kind of cartoon monstrosity. So for that, I say thank you, Sony, for letting the animators go in a direction that makes them look like professionals for once. But that's just for the things we're familiar with the Smurfs. What about the new stuff? The things that go beyond Smurf Village and onto the Forbidden Forest and the Lost Village? Well, that's where you can find some of the more unique aspects. The standout moments in the forest are all the different plants and animals that the characters interact with. Not only do they bring out the vibrant color palette that the movie holds, but also has this Alice in Wonderland style of creativity. You do also have the Lost Village, and how they would have many different elements that are more connected with nature than the Guy Smurfs have. It must have been one of the more fun things for the animators to work on. However, if there is one thing to criticize onto the animation, is that while there are some creative aspects, others are not. For the most part, the entire background consists of nothing but forest and Gargamel's evil lair. They may look unique, but that's more because of the creatures and the effects done in the film. Other than that, the whole place doesn't feel like a whole new magical world, and instead, it's just a place with big trees. The best thing I could say about the movie is that, while it is just good, it's the best animation Sony has done in a decade. The characters. As you may know, the Smurfs are each identified with their personality. Even if they all look the same, their character trait is what makes them unique. The downside of this, though, is that it makes the characters feel like generic tropes with no sense of development onto them. Who they are is just who they are and nothing more. Papa Smurf is the leader and the father figure of the Smurfs, Brainy is the smart guy, Clumsy is the slapstick comic relief, and Hefty is the tough guy that's all about the muscles. Even with the ladies, there really isn't much. All of them are just native warriors other than Smurf Willow as the leader, Smurf Storm as the tough girl, and Smurf Blossom as the one who's really annoying. When we look into the main character of the film, Smurfette, it does play a lot with her origins where she was created by Gargamel, thus making her more different than all the other Smurfs.
Follow me! I found a map to a lost village, but we'll have to go through the Forbidden Forest. Wow!
But other than that, she's just the typical kind-hearted protagonist on the search for her place in the world. The film could have made that interesting, but it rather wants to focus on montages of the characters goofing around to Eiffel 65's I'm Blue. And then you have Gargamel. If there's one thing that the previous films did better than this one, it's that at least Hank Azaria tries to pull off a goofy villain with his own comedic flair, thus making him stand out as Gargamel. Here, however, with Rainn Wilson's performance and the way that he's written, he's been completely reduced to a generic villain that only wants more power.
And finally, use that magic to become the most powerful wizard in the world! Oh, look at me with hair.
It doesn't help either that the film fails at making him funny with cheap jokes and constantly make this running gag about his ego. All these characters can offer just one piece of personality, and for a movie that's supposed to be all about them, they really don't offer much. Technically, yes, this is better than the previous Smurf movies, but that's not really saying much. Smurfs The Lost Village is just a mediocre adventure that rather wants to play safe with a dull story, cheap gags, a cast of one-dimensional characters, and some good animation. The only upgrade it did was that it went from a terrible movie to a generic kids flick. I mean, sure, I don't hate it, but I'm still hesitant to say that this is a good movie. The only type of audience that this film is made for is just kids. The way that it's made simpler than other films makes it easier for them to eat this up. Anyone older than that would have to be a rental at the most, but only if you're really interested in the Smurfs in the first place. Even if this is a Sony Pictures animation film, believe it or not, this actually does not get the Animat seal of garbage. Sure, it's not great, but not bad enough to say it sucks. But if you do miss those times that I give Sony a good smack in the face for their own stupidity, oh, don't you worry. I'm just saving it all up for when they unleash their ultimate downfall.
Oh, that's not even convincing.